important. And from the organizational perspective, how negotiation matters, what should be the leader's mindset while dealing with negotiation, and what are the different responsibilities of the leader. And finally, we will also see some of the strategies to effective negotiations. So first and the foremost thing when it comes to negotiation, it is about the day-to-day scenarios that all of us would come across, be it at home or in a social gathering or at workplace. Negotiation happens all the time. Every time when you're communicating with another person, there is a negotiation that happens. Only the exception could be when you're all by yourself. Even there, within yourself, within your own thoughts, you may be making some trade-off negotiations, right? So it has definitely become an inevitable factor when it comes to day-to-day affairs. So the moment we tell the word negotiation, most of the times what we think about is a sales situation, or there is a whenever we do some trading, right? There is a bargain that happens between two different individuals, and they'll be trying to reach a mutual consensus, mutually acceptable solutions in terms of certain conditions or contractual terms and agreements and all these types of things. It can occur, primarily negotiation can occur in various contexts. If you consider an organization, it can happen with customers, stakeholders, employees, third-party organizations, contractors, vendors, everywhere. So we can basically classify this into internal negotiation within the organization and external. When it comes to internal, naturally, an employee doing a negotiation with the hiring team for a better compensation, salaries, negotiating for roles and responsibilities, and if there is a conflicting situation, what can be the better conflict resolution model, and there will be a negotiation. So any situation that you take in an organizational context to the internal, there are going to be negotiations. And when it comes to external, like I said before, with any third-party organizations, there will be a contract, an agreement, and it could be referred as SLA, the service level agreements. And if there are mergers, acquisitions, and there are multiple situations, this external factors will also have negotiations, right? Now, why do we need to negotiate? So like I said, we are dealing with diverse set of individuals. We deal with individuals, and people operate as individual and also operate in groups. So like we all know, no two brains are the same, right? People think differently, people are creative, and the situations and the circumstances accordingly, people behave and respond differently. And with the recency effect, or if there are more developments and they gain more thoughtfulness due to that, it will be evolving. So it becomes an inevitable factor that negotiating with a proper conversations and making it as a contract and agreement is pretty important. Now, when it comes to the organizational context, right? It could be any goals or the projects that you're working on. When it comes to the vision, mission, values of the organization, or within the organization, there are a lot of activities, tasks, and deliverables, so many things that happens, right? In all these circumstances, we should be looking at negotiation happening in the right practice. So, for example, while defining the goal statement, right? We talk about SMART framework. Why? It is because to make sure that everybody understand what the goal is going to be delivered. And when it comes to a charter for an organization, what are the various list of things that the organization will follow? That has to be documented, because unless it is documented, there are going to be confusions, or the awareness about what the organization will deliver will not be known, and people have to assume a lot, and that we end up having some negotiations. So when it comes to agreements or statement of work, or when there is a contractual situation with a third-party organization, having a conversation with the prospective bidders during bidder conferences, or having any conversations with the team, like I said, there's a conflict resolution situations, or if there is a release schedule on various features and to be released to the customers, there will be acceptance criteria. For that, we need to negotiate with the stakeholders, product owners, deciding on the go no-go criteria. So these are all the possible organizational context when it comes to negotiation. And there are multiple different constraints as a leader we should be considering before we go and negotiate. So first and the foremost thing is, like, what is the scope of the goal? Anything which is outside the scope of the goal, should I really be worried about? Or anything which is within the scope of what we have agreed with the customers and stakeholders, and if that is going to be affected, yes, negotiation is required. And when it comes to scheduling, right, if in order to deliver the scope, if my schedule is changing, should I be taking more time to deliver? There comes the negotiation. And then the cost factors, how my budget is affected if my scope and the time is changing. Will I have to spend more in order to accomplish that if I have to deliver something soon? Or what happens to my return on investment? Is it going to go down or going to go up? So these kind of scope, schedule, budget constraints should be considered when it comes to negotiation. Beyond this, there are other factors like quality of my deliverable. When the time is changing, obviously the quality of the output will also change. So that becomes another factor. The risk factors, various risks that may directly or indirectly affect my plan that I should be considering. Then what is the risk response that I should be producing in order to mitigate the problem, known or unknown problems that may come across. So stakeholders, and then some of the regulatory and compliance requirements. So all these types of things becomes the major constraints when it comes to negotiation at the organizational context. Now, there are multiple responsibilities that a leader has when it comes to negotiation. The first and foremost thing is examining the boundary of negotiation. If you take any organization, for example, there will be multiple portfolios, programs, related projects. There will be operations teams, functional, non-functional teams, multiple departments will exist. Everybody will have their own goals and objectives to deliver. From this point of view, when you are a leader of a particular team, you should be able to understand what are the boundaries of my team and my team's deliverables. You should not shy away in terms of negotiating your boundary. Otherwise, the expectations will be unclear. Team will be thinking that, okay, I need to be delivering ABC, but the original expectations of the organization could be XYZ. So as a leader, it's your primary responsibility is to ensure that you're examining the boundary of negotiation and deal with it. The second important responsibility is to evaluate the priorities and understand the ultimate objective as well. Understanding the priorities of you and your team and mapping it with the ultimate objective is an essential element. And for this, you can use a lot of prioritization techniques. You can also involve your team, like the Moscow technique, which is must have, should have, could have, and won't have. By defining the different deliverables in these four categories, you are prioritizing the deliverable to the customer. Pareto principles. What are those most important 20% of the aspects that me and my team will be focusing in order to deliver the 80% value to the end customer? You can use a critical path method when it comes to scheduling conflicts. As long as I ensure that I'm delivering the activities that are in my critical path, I don't need to really worry, because the critical path is the one that defines whether you are meeting the schedule as promised or not. So ensuring that there are no deviations to the critical path becomes a critical factor. And you can do ABC analysis, which talks about a matrix covering urgent versus important factors. Like, this is urgent but not important, this is not urgent but important, but this particular activity is both urgent and important. By that way, you can prioritize various different activities. You can do cost benefit analysis. By doing ABC activities, what is going to be the investment that I need to make in terms of resources and various different things? And with that investment, what is the returns that I'm getting? So do the cost benefit analysis and then do the ranking to identify what is your priority. You can even use Kano model, which is very popular to understand the end customer needs. What are the basic needs of the customers? What are the performance needs of the customer? And what are those factors that are going to be delightful to the customers? And what are those features that might actually irritate the customer, so that I should not have certain factors? So these types of feature-based decisions that you make with the Kano model. So basically the point is there are multiple prioritization techniques that can be used in order to ensure that as a leader you are evaluating the priorities and ultimately understanding the objectives as well. The next important responsibility of a leader is to ensure that the objectives of the agreement are met. It's not just about understanding the scope and evaluating the priorities and understanding the objectives. It is also to ensure that the objectives of the agreements are met. So as a leader, please plan how you will verify the agreements are being met. What you can do is you can classify this between product, process, and people. When it comes to product, ensuring that product increments are being demoed to the product owners and stakeholders who are representing the customers. When it comes to the process, ensuring that you have monitoring and controlling mechanisms to ensure the well-defined processes are followed by your team. And when it comes to people, you can constantly have those discussions to ensure that the understanding, the negotiations happen to ensure the mutually beneficial factors are taken into consideration. By doing these three ways for product, process, and people, you ensure that your objectives of the agreement are met. The next important responsibility of a leader is to ensure that we are participating in the negotiation process. This is something we cannot delegate it to someone else. This being the prima facie for while forming the team and forming the ground rules before we get started with the goal of the organization. This will act as the pioneer for the whole thing. So this cannot be delegated. So as a leader, you plan early and participate. Thereby, you have an objective to build a cooperative and collaborative discussions with everyone who will be and who are affected in the deliverable that you're making. Always remember that you should be looking for a win-win situation. Right from the beginning, we've been talking about mutually solvable solutions, which means it cannot be a win-lose or a lose-win situation. It has to be a win-win for both. When we talk about a client and a vendor relationship, it has to be a mutually conducive solutions. Both the client and the vendor should be happy at the end of the contract. When it comes to the team members and the leaders, it should be mutual. So any negotiations, always think about win-win as a solution where we are collaborating and creating a cooperative environment. Moving on, we have talked about the leader's responsibility. Now we will talk about some of the strategies for effective negotiations. In order to accomplish the key responsibilities of negotiations, it is very important to consider some of the effective strategies. We have talked about the win-win strategy, which is to ensure that there is a long-term relationship is maintained. So every time when there is a conversation, thinking from the other person's perspective and ensuring that it is not one-sided conversation, we end up ensuring that both ourselves and the other persons are also feeling satisfied, thereby we are collaborating. There is another acronym called BATNA, which means identifying best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It is as simple as anytime when you're planning for anything, you always have a contingency plan, which is an alternate plan B. Now, if you take cricket for a crazy example that I can think of, is when there is a cricket match which is being organized due to any natural calamities, like there's going to be thunderstorm, rainfall, for all these kind of situations, there is always a plan B which is already planned, right? Immediately the Duckworth-Lewis method will be implemented, or there will be a reserve day that is already planned. So when it comes to organizational negotiations, considering the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So if the plan A of the negotiated agreement fails, what is plan B? Which will give you the clarity in making the right decisions. Moving on, interest-based negotiation. So this is another strategy which is very popular. You would have heard several times many people saying, put yourself in the other person's shoes and see how you are able to tackle the situation, right? Here the focus is about the interest of the other person over your own self-interest. This is where the empathetic part comes into pictures. So emphasizing with others instead of focusing on some fixed positions is the key to interest-based negotiation. More importantly, the fourth and the final important strategies when it comes to effective negotiation is following emotional intelligence and cultural awareness. It is crucial that you manage your own emotions before you manage others, right? Understanding what are the strengths and weaknesses of self and the other person with whom you are negotiating with an objective to build a rapport. Thereby, you create a positive, negotiable environment. That is the key thing here. When it comes to emotional intelligence, it is all about building the right rapport so that you create a positive environment, which becomes an invitation for someone to look forward to come and have that constructive conversation. And as a leader, you should be sensitive and be fully aware of the cultural differences that exist with the other person with whom you're negotiating. They may have some different belief system, because they may be from a different geography, different ethnicity. There could be multiple different factors which you should be fully aware of before you get started with the negotiation. So these are some of the strategies, and when it comes to the responsibilities of negotiation, when it comes to negotiating your boundaries within the organization. So this is a third important enabler when it comes to developing a mindset for realizing the synergy within your team. With that, I really thank you for your patience listening to me on this topic. Next week, I will meet you with the fourth enabler. Until then, have a good one. I will see you in the next video.